lot of birds and insects. I like that a lot of people saw some bats. I saw some great bats flying a couple weeks ago when I was camping, just as the sun was setting, seeing them zip through the sky. And something else, I'd love to know what other people or what the something else was. So I'll give it just another couple seconds if you want to make your vote, and then I will share it out so you can all see what all of our friends saw. So let's share out those results. So hopefully you guys can see that. Birds with 88%. There are lots and lots of birds here in Massachusetts and around the world that we saw flying. A handful of people saw those bats, lots of insects, and 14% saw something else. So that was super exciting, but now I think it's time to find out all about Madagascar. So I'm going to ask our animals and our curators to turn on their cameras and introduce themselves.
Hi everybody, my name is Corey and I am the invert keeper here at the Museum of Science, and today we are learning about animals from Madagascar. So our first animal that we're going to be learning about today is our Madagascar hissing cockroach. So I'm sure you guys have seen or heard of Madagascar hissing cockroaches before. They're very popular pets, very popular in classrooms. And what makes them so cool is that they're very easygoing animals. So normally when we think of cockroaches, the first thing we think of is really gross animals, right? That's kind of what's been ingrained in our brains, that these are gross animals, but that's so not the case. Cockroaches in general are very clean animals. Madagascar hissing cockroaches actually have a symbiotic mite that lives on them that cleans off debris on their body and also then eats food that the Madagascar hissing cockroach is also eating. So very clean animals. So as their name and as our program today suggests, they are from Madagascar. So Madagascar hissing cockroaches tend to eat kind of any organic material. So any plant material that's kind of starting to break down, fruits, vegetables, and other organic material like that. So today, Liz has two hissing cockroaches climbing up her arm there. One of them is a female and one of them is a male. So the one that Liz has closest to the camera now is our female. And if you look at, so right now she's showing us her abdomen, but Liz is giving a nice view of her head. If you look just behind her head to kind of the little plate that's behind there, it's smooth. And if the male, who looks like he's making a run for it up Liz's arm, when he gets up close, you'll actually be able to see that that same area has two large horns. And those horns are used for a couple different reasons, but the biggest one is to fight for dominance in their colony or in their group. So they're a little territorial. So they'll use those horns to actually flick other males off of their area. Whichever male cockroach has the highest point in its territory is the dominant male cockroach. So he wants to flip other males off so he can be the highest and have the best ladies. So it really doesn't matter about the size of the cockroach, more about the, those horns and how hooked they are. So as their name also suggests, they hiss. So they make a hissing noise. But unlike us, if we make a noise, mostly it comes from our mouth. Cockroaches, they make their noises a little differently. So they don't have a nose like we do, and their mouth is very different than ours. They have spiracles that run down their body, and that's how they breathe. So they're pretty much tiny holes. And whenever they want to make their hissing sound, they collapse their body down, which pushes air out and makes that hissing noise. What makes it so cool is they actually have different types of hisses. So they have one to attract females. They have one to attract males. They have one to argue between each other. And they have one that's kind of a fighting between males. They also make their noises so individual that other cockroaches can tell them apart. So pretty smart that they're able to hear and tell apart from one another. So I'm going to turn it over and see if we have any questions.
Of course. As always, we have lots of questions. So we'll start right at the beginning. Andrew, who is 7, asks, what eats it?
That is an amazing question, because let me tell you, a cockroach is an amazing meal for any animal. So pretty much any omnivore or carnivore that can get their hands on one of these cockroaches will want to eat them. Humans have even been known to eat them. They're pretty much just a big sack of yummy goo that other animals want to eat. So it's a good protein source. That's an amazing question.
Nice. And I may have missed it. You may have answered this, but Kayla and Danny want to know, why do they hiss?
That's a great question. So it's the same reason. Why do we talk? Why do we use our hands when we talk? Why do monkeys make calls? Why do birds make calls? It's so they can communicate with each other. They've evolved to be able to push that air out of the side of their body to make that hissing sound. And a big reason they do it is to ward off predators. So if a cockroach is not used to being handled or not used to being around people, when you first go to pick it up, it will make that hissing noise because it wants to startle you and scare it away. Because most insects, we don't really hear them making a ton of noise on average. So that big noise can be really startling to predators. That's an amazing question.
And as we get every week, in this case, it's from Vivi, age 9, Holden, age 4, and Faith, age 9. What are their names?
That is a great question. So we had a volunteer who named these cockroaches. The one in front of you right now is Elvis, and the female that is back in its case is named Elvira.
Awesome. And Maya, who is 7, asks, how long do they live?
That's such a wonderful question. So they typically live about 5 years. Some do live a little bit longer, some live a little bit shorter, but they tend to live around 5 years.
And Kayla and Danny have an interesting question of what colors can they come in? Because I know something cool that I hope you can share about when they molt.
Yes, so that's a great question. And Karen, if I don't share what you're thinking of, feel free to jump in and share. So when we say Madagascar hissing cockroaches, what's actually a common name that ranges for about 20 different species. So they can come in tons of different colors depending on the species. So they can be brown, they can be a reddish tint, or black like the ones we have here. As Karen had mentioned, when Madagascar hissing cockroaches molt, it's really cool. They are actually bright white. I don't mean like an off-white. They are bright white because their exoskeleton hasn't hardened yet. It's still really soft, similar to like our fingernails. It's made out of similar stuff. So until it hardens, it's pretty mushy. And then when it hardens, it develops that color. Karen, did I hit on what you were hinting at?
That's exactly. I always love it when I come across the colony and you just see that one bright white, really soft, squishy looking cockroaches in amongst all of its friends. So I remember the first time I saw it, I'm like, is it an albino? Is that a thing in insects? So no, that's exactly what I was hitting on. There are a couple of questions about how old are these individuals, but as well as how long can hissing cockroaches live?
That's a great question. So we don't actually track the age of our cockroaches. Once they are kind of in a colony altogether, they pretty much all blend in. We do have some like distinguishing features on some of them that we're able to tell individuals apart, but we really don't know how old these guys are. But they can live to be about 5 years.
Cool. And I think, so we have time to get to our 2 other animals today. We'll finish up with, what do they eat?
Great question. So in the wild, they eat decaying matter. So any plant material, anything to help break down any material that's in our ecosystem, because they actually like keeping our planet really clean. If we didn't have cockroaches, our planet would be really disgusting. Cockroaches help break down organic material. They help break down leaf matter, fruits and vegetables. They'll also eat, other animals that have decayed a lot, they'll also eat. So they're really great cleaners. They're very important for our environment. And Karen, was there a part 2 to that question, or did I get that whole question?
Nope, I think it was just, what do they eat?
Awesome, perfect. And then just here at the museum, they get fresh fruits and vegetables, and then they also get fish food.
I'm just going to share my screen as we're swapping out our animals. So if you guys want to take a screenshot of this, just to remind yourselves of what we saw today and some cool things about the Madagascar hissing cockroaches, like for instance, they can tell who is hissing at them. So they each have their individual sounds. So Liz, let me know when we're ready to move on to our next. Are we ready yet or not quite?
We're getting pretty close.
All right.
He is about to reveal the next animal, which I should give a bit of a warning, is a snake. So hopefully some of you are as excited as I get when snakes come out, but I like to give the warning just in case people are not sure. All right, so in just another moment, our snake will be revealed. Now this
beautiful.
is a snake called a Dumeril's ground boa constrictor. So let's break that name up a little bit. That first part of the name, Dumeril, that's actually named after a scientist. It's the person who first described this species. So that covers the Dumeril's part of the name. Next, ground. This animal does spend most of its time on the ground. They are actually really great ambush predators, ambush hunters. That basically means they are sit and wait predators. So their colors, I think, are quite beautiful when you see them up close, like you're looking at right now. But if you could picture those colors on dead, dried leaves in kind of a rainforest setting, they actually give a lot of camouflage. So the snake will basically sit there in those dead, dried leaves and wait for something to go by. And then they will strike very, very quickly and go after that tasty meal that might have walked by them. So that covers the ground part of the name. You will find them mostly on the ground, on the forest floor. Now let's get to the boa part of the name. I'm guessing probably most of you have heard of boas before. They are a pretty famous group of snakes, but a lot of people don't realize boas is an entire family of snakes. So there are lots of different species of boas. Usually when people think boa, they think it's going to be gigantic. I think you guys would agree with me. This is a pretty good sized snake, but maybe it's not that giant you had in your mind when you're thinking of that boa. Dumeril's ground boas are pretty moderate sized snakes. They typically get about 6 feet in length. That might seem really huge and really daunting, but this individual is probably close to that 6 feet. He's probably at least over 5 feet. As you probably guessed, he doesn't like to stretch out in a long straight line and be measured very often. So we often have to do estimates for his exact length. These species have been known to get even towards 8 feet in length. So they definitely can be pretty good sized. Now, I mentioned a little bit about that hunting style that these ground boas have, that ambush, that sit and wait. Now, they are a non-venomous species of snake. Corey is pretty brave with animals, but she wouldn't hold something venomous in her bare hands. They are, in fact, constrictors, as all boas are. Now, sometimes people have heard constrict. They sort of know what it means. They don't know exactly how it works. Usually they know it involves squeezing, and constrict is to squeeze. So they do squeeze their prey to kill. A lot of times I explain that, and then people get a little worried for Corey because they see that the snake is kind of wrapped around her hands and arms. Now, the snake is not constricting Corey, I can assure you of that. He is holding on. So he doesn't want to fall to the ground. Even though they're not typically tree climbers, he's just kind of using her arm like it's a warm tree branch, and he doesn't want to fall onto the ground. They use that constriction to kill their prey. Prey is anything 2 to 3 times the size of that head. You guys have an awesome view of his head right now. Corey is a lot bigger than 2 to 3 times the size of that head. So I can assure you she's pretty safe and comfortable handling the snake in this manner. So I see we already have a lot of questions. So why don't I turn it over to some of those, Karen?
Excellent. And we can assume some of the usuals. So the very first one that came in, Vivi, who is 9, wants to know, what is the name of this snake?
You know, I knew that question was going to come up today, and I'm actually a little embarrassed by the answer I have to give. This snake has had a couple different names over the years, and nothing really stuck. There's actually an educator here at the museum. Her name is Becca. She is currently training on this snake, and she has been tasked with coming up with a great name for this snake. So I guess I'm going to have to leave you with stay tuned. Hopefully we have a really awesome name for this snake very soon.
Maybe once Becca picks a name, we can get an awesome picture and post it on our social media channels and see what the name gets chosen. So this is another one of my favorites. I appreciate this person must know a little bit about Madagascar because they ask, do they eat lemurs?
So they are known to eat baby lemurs. Probably a full-size lemur would be a little too big for this particularly sized snake, but that is a really good question. They are known to eat baby lemurs. Other small animals they're able to get, I mean, sometimes birds, although they're mostly on the ground, other small mammals they may come across, even things like lizards. They're really not too picky, but it's always going to be another animal. Snakes are obligate carnivores, meaning they have to eat meat and only meat.
So cool. And this is a great one, especially that nice close-up that we just got. Andrew, who is 7, says, why does he stick out his tongue? And somebody else asked, why is his tongue black?
So I guess I'll get to the color first. I don't really have a good answer for you. Some snakes have tongues that are more black. Some seem to have tongues that are more pink. I've never heard of a specific reason as to this color. So I guess I'm gonna have to just kind of leave that one. We're not really sure. But I can give you a pretty good answer as to why this snake is sticking out his tongue. So they actually use their tongues to help them smell. Every time he's flicking his tongue out, which he is doing a ton of, he's actually never been in this space at the museum where we are right now. So he's probably picking up a lot of scents he's never smelled before. So every time he sticks that tongue out, he's picking up those scent molecules, bringing them back into his mouth. On the roof of his mouth, he has something called a Jacobson's organ, which is connected to his brain and tells him what he is smelling. So he's picking up lots and lots of scent, and he's just using that tongue to really help collect those particles.
Excellent. And I think before we run out of time for our third animal, we'll wrap this one up. A couple people have asked, is it a male or a female, and how can you tell?
So there are some things you can look for on the outside of the snake's body, but nothing works in all cases. Females are supposed to be larger than males. They also have something towards the back end of their body called spurs. These are actually what we believe are leftover remnants of legs. So males are supposed to have bigger spurs than females. I actually think, based on some of those observations and guidelines, that this one is a male, since he is on the smaller end and he does have pretty big spurs, but I actually don't know for sure. The only for sure way of knowing would be to go inside the snake's body, and we haven't really had a need to do that with this particular individual, but I tend to say he.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to share the fun facts about our Dumeril's ground boa as we swap out to our final Madagascar animal of the day. And I love the cool fact for the Dumeril's ground boa. So I'll mention it here as we're swapping out animals. They are ovoviviparous, which is a fun word to learn how to say, meaning that they seemingly give live birth, but it's still an egg development inside the snake. I can't remember if you mentioned that, Liz.
I don't believe it did come up.
Cool.
So, yeah,
I'm glad that you put it as the cool fact then, because there are a bunch of animals that do that, and I find it fascinating. So once Corey has our next friend all set and ready, I will stop sharing my screen.
We're just about ready. Now, I know some of you may have been thinking, all right, we saw a couple cool Madagascar animals, but we really want to see something cute and fuzzy. So this final animal will be for all of you that were hoping you'd see something cute and adorable today. Now, I said cute and fuzzy. I think you guys would agree with me, this is definitely a cute animal. Fuzzy we'll talk about in just a moment. Now, this is a really small animal that has a really big, complicated name. The name of this animal is a lesser Madagascar hedgehog tenrec. Is that a mouthful or what? Now, kind of the most important part of that name to remember is that last word that I gave you, Tenrec. Now that is spelled Tenrec. Now Tenrecs are their own order or group of mammals. To give you a comparison, another order of mammals is rodent. So some of you have probably heard of rodents before. So Tenrecs are only related to other Tenrecs. What's really pretty cool is they only live in Madagascar. So we believe that Tenrecs came over to Madagascar and evolved when there weren't lots of other mammals on Madagascar. So they kind of evolved differently to fit holes in the ecosystem that weren't being filled since there weren't a lot of other mammals. So there are Tenrecs like the one you're looking at right now that are called hedgehog Tenrecs. There's also Tenrecs that look more like shrews. They're called shrew Tenrecs. There are even Tenrecs that are more like otters, and they're called otter Tenrecs. There's mouse Tenrecs. It's a really interesting group of mammals. There's about 29 different species of these Tenrecs, and they all kind of evolved differently to, again, fit those holes in the ecosystem. Now, I said this hedgehog Tenrec. I know you guys are probably thinking they look and seem a lot like hedgehogs, maybe you've seen before, but they're actually not closely related. Since they're only related to other Tenrecs, they're very distantly related to these hedgehogs. They are kind of similar though. They do have sharp spines on their bodies. So you're actually getting a pretty good view of those spines right now. Now, when these animals feel threatened, they will kind of curl their bodies up and kind of use those spines as protection. Tenrecs are a little interesting though, whereas hedgehogs really hold to that tight ball and stay curled up, Tenrecs are known to eventually come out of that ball and kind of charge after whatever's coming after them. It might be a little hard for us to take this animal seriously if it started charging at us, but I guess it might be pretty intimidating if you're an animal trying to hunt them in the wild. Now, I see we have a lot of questions, Karen, so why don't I turn it over to some of those?
All right, so the usual ones, is it a male or a female? What do they eat? And what eats it?
All right, so this one is a male. It's actually pretty hard to tell the difference between them from the outside of their bodies. They actually are pretty primitive. So they have some kind of older characteristics. They have a cloaca, which is one opening. That's kind of like reptiles and birds. It's very unusual for mammals to have that. So it does make it pretty hard to tell. We did have a vet determine going inside this animal's body that this one is a male. You've probably seen him have a few snacks while he's been out here. What he was eating right now are mealworms. That's one of their favorite treats here at the museum. They are mostly insectivores, so they do eat a lot of insects, worms, things like that. They will occasionally eat vegetation. Here at the museum, they actually eat a special kibble that's made for animals that eat a lot of insects. Now, Tenrecs do a pretty good job defending themselves because they have those spines. They could potentially have prey. There is a big predator in Madagascar, pretty good sized predator, I should say, called a fossa that is known to go after them. There are some snakes that may be able to get a young one and just kind of deal with those spines kind of hurting. Maybe larger birds, but they do pretty well defending themselves having those spines. I think I hit all aspects of that question.
You did. I'm impressed. You got all three there. And then another pairing. What is this one's name and how old is he?
That's another good one. This one does have a name, so I guess I do get to say that. His name is actually Gregory, and he just turned 2 years old back in August. He was actually born here at the museum where his father and mother still live, and actually 2 older sisters that he does have here at the museum. So a big family group that we have here.
So we have 2 questions about those spines. Tanner, who is 5, asks, do they shed their quills? And Adeline wants to know, do the spines always hurt or are they soft when they're not threatened if you tried to pet it?
Again, really good questions. So the spines right now, he's pretty relaxed. He's kind of walking around in the enclosure. He's not curled up into that tight ball. If Corey touched it with her bare hand, it wouldn't feel completely soft like you were petting a cat or a dog, but it wouldn't pierce her skin. It wouldn't hurt her that much. If he were curled up and she tried to grab him, it would probably hurt her bare hand. I'm sorry, what were the other parts of the question? I did so well before.
You did so well. And of course, now I'm forgetting. How old is it and what's its name? I think you got it.
I think I got to those.
Yeah, I think you did. So since we
Oh,
are
I think about
running,
shedding the spines.
oh,
Is
shedding.
that right?
Sorry, yes, that was the
Yeah.
last question. Do they shed their quills? And they're
They
not quills.
They might actually occasionally shed them, just like we might shed a little bit of our hair, but the spines are not designed to come out of their body as readily as quills that are on what porcupines have. So quills and spines are a little bit different. They might occasionally come out, but they're not really the same, that they come out very easily.
All right, I'm going to end on this a good one because I love Tenrecs and I think this is a fun answer. Do they live in the ground or in trees?
They actually are known to be semi-arboreal, so they are pretty good climbers. I know he's not doing great climbing this clear plexi material that he's in front of right now, but he actually does have pretty sharp claws and is good at getting into low shrubbery and trees. And that's actually pretty different from those hedgehogs, which really spend just about all of their time on the ground. So that is kind of a fun one to end on.
Yeah, they're some of my favorite. Liz knows that, Corey probably knows that, but I love the Tenrec so much. So I'm going to share that last slide about our hedgehog Tenrecs if you guys want to make a note of it, and then bring myself back. We are just about out of time, so rapid fire, 3 animals all about Madagascar, really cool animals to share. I want to thank both Liz and Corey and our cockroaches and our ground boa and our hedgehog Tenrec for joining us today. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We certainly can't do these programs without an audience, so we love that you come back every week. If you are curious about what other programs we're doing or what you can find, you can certainly check out mos.org/MOS at home. I will let you know that as we're transitioning into September, some of our MOS Live programs are going to be a little fewer as we sort of rework what we're doing, hopefully to support our school audiences as we move into the school year in September and beyond. So definitely keep an eye out both on our social media channels as well as our website. And if you enjoyed this presentation or anything you've done with the museum in these past 6 months, we'd love for you to potentially contribute if you are able to do so. And you can do that by going to engage.mos.org/welcome. So with that, thanks again for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the program, learned a few new things, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. We'll see you next time.